1 minute.
Was that here?
We don't have
Yeah.
air conditioning.
Everything turns out.
Yes, it's a rural farming community. We don't have air conditioning.
I wish we had a barn.
It's cool. It would, at least there'd be a breeze.
5:15. We're setting seats for the state furniture.
I thought maybe they asked if there was some.
Not yet. Not yet, they're working on it. High standards, man.
Anybody want a copy of the agenda?
You'll say hi when you walk in.
Yes,
You know who
please.
they are, right?
All right.
No, well, I've seen pictures
Anyway, me.
online.
They know who you are. No. Nothing. No ACs.
Remember,
Community.
Remember, they're not.
Yeah, that's
they're
how
not
it's
full.
Not right.
I bet some rural
Oh,
farmers
yeah.
have AC in their homes.
Yeah.
All right, good evening. Verizon tells me it's 6 o'clock. Planning board meeting in order, August 11th. And I'll do a roll call. I'm Ed Ingles. I'm here. Marshall Goldberg. Steve Berry.
Here?
Leah Gage.
Here.
Mark Lofgren.
Here.
Jim Lowry.
Here.
Rich Stacker.
Here.
Wow, everybody's here. Awesome. We have some former planning board members here as well, but we don't have to introduce them. Appointment of alternates for RSA 67311. We don't have any alternates tonight. And we're waiting for some guests to arrive, so I guess we can continue with our normal agenda. Leah, do you have anything announcement-wise or mail or
Not that I can think of.
nothing important at least?
No.
All right, let's jump into the minutes from July 14th. Wishful thinking that it was cooler. So we have July 14th minutes. The only comment I had was under public comments, the second bullet point should read that Jim Lowry is appointed, or the motion was to appoint him for the remainder of Gus's term. And it says which is until 2027. It's actually until next March, and then he has to either run for re-election or what have you, and fill out the rest of Gus's term or run for a regular election. So just as long as we change that to be March of 26 instead of 27.
Noted.
And that was, I went back and watched the tape, and that's what the motion was actually. So that's the only change I have. So I'll entertain a motion to accept the minutes with that change.
I make motion to accept the minutes.
Second. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right. Let's do public comments. Does anybody have any public comments? We're waiting for some guests from Concord to show up, and hopefully we'll keep the public comments going when they're here, but does anybody have anything else we can deal with right now?
Will there be any public back and forth when the representatives are here?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
My plan is to, it's okay with you, Ed?
Won't mind, go
Just
ahead.
kidding. My plan is to have some questions from the board for them, and then public follow-up after the board has questions first.
Allegiance. Do the pledge of allegiance before they come.
We can do it when they're here. Normally not playing anything. Maybe good for them. Slightly, you know, so. Okay. So let's table, we'll leave public comments open for now. We don't have any new business, so we can probably go through some of the old business pretty quickly, I would think, right? So the ADU has, the new law has passed, and it's HB 577, I believe. been signed by the governor. We actually talked about it at the last meeting on July 14th. We didn't know whether it had been signed for sure, and it actually got signed the day after on July 15th. So where it stands now is that code enforcement knows about it and has been instructed to give building permits for ADUs in conjunction, in accordance with the new state law. And in March, we will have a warrant article that will actually literally change our language in the zoning ordinance. So as of now, it's kind of in this sort of temporary period where code enforcement is on board with it and will give the permits accordingly. So I think
Does everyone know what ADU stands for?
Any questions on that from the public? We still have public comments open, so. Alrighty. Rules of procedure, we're slowly but surely getting through those, right? And kind of in the appendix part of it?
Yes, slowly is the key word at the moment.
Okay. So I think we'll probably have that, and we'll probably push the master plan as well, since that's coming in slowly as well. So that's the third thing on our old business here. As far as the master plan goes, we're waiting on historic resources, and we should have that within 2 weeks, right?
Yeah, kind of natural resources, because Frank wants to clear it with the Conservation Commission.
Okay.
We're waiting on maps from the state to update all the maps.
Right, but I haven't had any requests for anything yet.
Let me comment. Sure. There's a bunch of maps in our master plan that come directly from SRPC.
Yes?
So I question how they're going to update those. They show all the conservation land, they show all our zoning areas. How do they get the data to do that? There's one map that Lee and I are working on, that's the roads. Where are our scenic roads, where are the names on the roads. So we're working that, but as I go through the plan and look at all these other maps, I believe they originated at SRPC. So how do we facilitate that?
Well, if that's, I mean, again, I'm just waiting for, I mean, on the historical piece, what's missing exactly? There's a historical piece?
Mary Lou's, she's handling it, she's going to send it to me when it's done. I don't know what she's doing exactly.
I can tell you, because my bride is on the Historical Society. So that thing is done. It's baked, it's beautiful. If they want to make some changes, great. But I think it's totally cool. And if you want, I'll just circle back with Mary Lewis, through Jan and just make sure that I'm not...
I just talked to her today.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I think she's great. I'll talk to her.
Okay. If you can push it along, great.
Well, no, I think it'll save her time. That's fine. I know she's busy, so
Yeah.
I want, if she's doing stuff,
Yeah.
I'll get in the middle of that one, so I can help get that across the finish line. I think you got my note today about
Yes.
my section, there's nothing really changed, that is what it is. And what else are we missing? Oh, Frank. And what else?
I didn't double check, so I don't know. I don't know what else. I think we're almost there.
Right, so exactly. All right, so I will help to push this along.
Thank you.
So just so the members of the public that don't come all the time know, we're in the process of updating the master plan. The last time it was done was in 2006, and we're supposed to do it roughly every 10 years or so, so it's been a lot longer than that. And we're trying to do all of it. A lot of towns will do piecemeal and just update it as they go. It's probably what we should have been doing, but we're trying to do most of it, or if not all of it, all at once. And we'll have a public comment period at one of these meetings. It'll be at a planning board meeting, probably, hopefully in September. And then we'll take those comments and do our edits, because we distributed the writing of the different parts of it. So we're going to have different writing styles. So somebody's got to sort of collate all that, make it sound like one person wrote it. We might have, maybe AI does that for us, who knows. But in any case, we hope to have a little bit more progress in September and a draft that the public can read and comment on prior to the meeting. We might push it into October, but hopefully by September. Anything else on the master plan, and then we can go back to Councilman. Councilman Kenny,
Yes,
thanks for coming. Come on up, we've got a seat for you.
a special excuse
here.
okay.
It doesn't look as comfortable as these black chairs, but it probably is better, actually. It's
Okay,
been around
sure.
for a while.
Absolutely, thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here.
I grew up in Brookfield, you probably didn't know that. No, actually Wakefield, but it seems like I grew up in Brookfield.
Nice. So, Joe Kenny is executive counselor for the governor, and you're in District 1, I believe. And there are, how many?
There are 5. So just a little overview, the council has been around since 1679 and formalized since obviously 1784. But it hasn't really changed that much over the years. There's 5 of us. I represent District 1, which represents from Pittsburgh all the way down to Durham. So it's kind of a large chunk of territory. Figured out it's about 3.5 hours from one end of my district to the other. And I travel those miles. So we vote on most all state contracts. We vote on billions of dollars over a 2-year period. Literally billions of dollars. So it's a lot of contracts. We'll have a governor and council meeting on Wednesday. And we also vote on boards and commissions and judicial confirmations. We have an important one coming up at the end of the month, the state Supreme Court nominee, which the governor will present at the end of the month, which will have public hearings, and we'll go ahead and decide, you know, if we're going to choose that person or not. So, but we get ourselves involved in lots of other matters. And we're kind of like the pulpit for state government and the executive branch, because I always try to, you know, say to my legislative friends, remember, you came up to me on the first day and asked me to co-sponsor a bill. But remember, this actually happened in Dennis Field many years ago. He wanted me to sponsor a bill when I got to the council. I said, Dennis, I'm not in the legislative branch anymore. I'm in the executive branch. And of course, his face turned beet red. And so it's very unique to New Hampshire. We're like 1 or 2 states in the country that have an executive council. And so as the governor would say, when she's in a meeting or an event with me, she says, oh, nice to see Councilor Kenny here today. They're the ones that tell me what to do at the executive branch level, because as I say to my Vermont friends, if I can get 2 thinking like me on the council, I know we don't have lieutenant governors over here, but put it this way, I'm half a governor. You go, oh, you have a little bit of power. I go, yeah, but we don't use it that frequently. And there's one contract that comes before us called the warrants contract from admin services, which is anywhere from $700 to $900 million. And I asked the admin Administrative Services Commissioner Charlie Arlen, I asked him, what if we voted that down? He goes, state government shut down. So very, very blunt. So we're kind of like Clark Kent by day, Superman by night if we have to be, but we're just the governor and council who listen to grassroots concerns, which housing is one of them. And so I'm here tonight to listen to your concerns on housing and the like.
Great, appreciate that. And you've been on the council 5 years or so?
No, I've been actually 10 years or
10?
more.
Okay.
I was in the state senate for 6 and 8 years in the New Hampshire House, so they know me in the compass circles.
Okay. And not for nothing, 3 tours with the Marines?
I did. I served 37 years, both active and reserve, and 3 tours in different war zones. So, and I'm not a hero. The people who didn't make it back are the true heroes.
With that in mind, one of the planning board members requested that we step out a little bit and just do Pledge of Allegiance. And
Sure.
honor of the
Yeah,
service.
absolutely. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our other guest is here.
Yes. Senator, welcome.
Welcome.
We'd love to have you grab this other chair here or sit here. either
No,
way.
I'll go here next to Joe. That's always a good comfortable place today.
Just don't stand behind me.
Good evening. I am Mark McConkey. I'm your state senator, District 3. I just had them print up some bullet points of items of legislation that's been passed this last session. For those, if you don't know, I'm my first term as a senator. I served 9 terms in the House, Public Works and Highways. All of my time being in the Senate, I went from a body of 400 to a body of 24 people. And when you do that, you end up with a more rounded committees. And I still serve in transportation, capital budget, natural resources, and I was on actual judiciary for some time. So I brought in some highlight bullets of legislation. I've just been named to a joint commission between the House and the Senate on reviewing zoning regulations when they were enacted in the state, towns' rights, state rights, all that sort of thing. So that's ongoing. And I was on the Speaker's Commission on Housing for a 2-year term, and I'm happy to answer anything you'd like or send me away with assignments. So.
I guess the first thing, we do have a few questions, but I guess the first thing, we'd just like to hear 2 to 3 minutes from each of you on, the voters have said that they want housing, there's a housing crisis, if you will. And what is Concord doing about it, and how does it affect a small town like Brookfield with 820 people? 2 or 3 minutes from each of you on that would be great.
Sure. It is the #1 crisis for any employer that I speak to. It's so much an issue that I have a couple different businesses. One business I've been at for a number of years, 30 plus years, is a convenience store. And it hits us with even trying to keep staff with the price of rents and everything, that we actually took it into our own hands to convert a building we had and turn it into housing. We're just about ready to open up so that we know we have a place for our staff to stay that is in the neighborhood of $750 as opposed to $1,100. I've had so many businesses, as they see this coming along, stopping in and say, hey Mark, I could use 1 or 2 of those apartments, but we're to the point that we're full. We did a charrette with Mount Washington Valley Housing on what's affordable housing look like in New Hampshire, in Carroll County specifically. And we looked at the county owns 800 acres of land, 700 of which we're not using at the county. What would it look like if the county were to provide some land? What would housing look like in there? We had a robust conversation. We didn't want it to be at the expense of federal money, which would then tie in who we would have in there. And as it turns out, an affordable house is in the $300,000 range, which still is out of touch for a lot of people. We have looked extensively at what rules are out there that are preventing developers from coming forward. One sticking point was if you're trying to, I'll just say doors, that's what the developers use. If they're trying to build a subdivision with 20 doors or more, they're finding before they can even get to your town to talk to the planning board, it's taking them 2 years to get through New Hampshire DOT to pull the first driveway permit. So we did some streamlining on that. That's going to happen. That'll happen in a matter of 2 or 3 months now. There's a lot of effort on expanding accessory dwelling units. We have a lot of people that live on the lake. I live on Ospey Lake, I'm fortunate. And there's a lot of older people that have homes on there that end up having to go away because they can't afford the taxes to be there. An accessory dwelling unit done right brings in that second income and helps that younger person or older person to stay in place. So I'm excited about what we're doing on that. The town of Ospey has spearheaded a lot of zoning changes, I think, in the right direction. I believe they're exploring even a little smaller lot size, because for developers, if you have to have 200 foot of road frontage, that's great big expense. And if we can bring that down, so they're exploring that. So I'm hopeful. There are some towns pushing back, saying you're doing too much. And that's why the Speaker and the Senate President want to have that commission to look at that, and I'm excited to be part of that. So it's just a huge need, no matter who you talk to.
So from my perspective, again, housing, childcare, workforce, huge topics in the state of New Hampshire. We're a state of about 1.4 million people, and in the summertime it explodes even further. So we're a desirable state because of, low taxes and natural resources, a safe state and low in poverty. Just a lot of great qualities about New Hampshire. We're always voted in the top 3 most livable states in the country. So with that comes responsibility and other issues, which is the housing issue. Now, a few years ago, Governor Sununu put $100 million towards Invest New Hampshire, and about $60 million of that was put into projects. And a lot of those projects for developers were, they had a gap of funding, particularly during COVID and after COVID, where there were costs of materials and labor. So they just needed that $1 million, $2 million to really allow them to build, an apartment project, or to, rehabilitate an old mill or something of that nature. So I think at the time we had we still have, about the same amount, about 60,000 units that the state needs now. And so I think the Invest in New Hampshire program will build out probably, when it's all said and done, about 1,800 units. And that should come to a conclusion here pretty soon. Projects, we're all as far north as, Berlin, Whitefield, Laconia, Franklin, down the seacoast, Manchester, Nashua. So the program was, pretty successful. But the type of money this time around, we don't have in the New Hampshire budget to help out on, creating opportunities for developers. It also helped out with demolition grants at the municipal level as well, which helped out a lot of properties that were, in total disrepair that needed to be knocked down, particularly in Berlin and, in Randolph. There were quite a few homes behind the Lowe's property that needed to be knocked down. And also there was some monies given to municipalities for technical assistance. So we're getting back to traditional budgeting. New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority is going to have its traditional programs back in place when it comes to helping out with public housing. Obviously, what the legislature did this session, they had, well over, 50 or more bills dealing with housing alone. And so not all of them got through. In fact, the majority didn't get through. There were a few pieces, I think Senator McConkey mentioned, accessory dwelling units, or some other refinements. But there's an aggressive group out there that really wants to push housing into New Hampshire. A developer's not going to develop unless they can make a profit. And a lot of that profit is taken away through time and delay and regulation. So from my standpoint, growing up in a small community like Brookfield, a bedroom community, I've always tried to look at it as a former selectman as a balance. You have to reach a balance in your community. You can't be overrun by development because you lose your quality of life, you lose who you are as an identity, but you also should recognize that there needs to be housing for the younger folks. If you're going to keep a young workforce locally or statewide, you need to provide some opportunities for them. The average home in New Hampshire is now at about $560,000. If you go to Dover, it's about $600,000. Go to to Portsmouth, it's about $800,000. And you can see with the increase in prices in houses that a young person coming out who might be making $30,000 or $40,000 all they can do is make a car payment, let alone a house payment, or even putting a down payment. So it's problematic. I don't have the cure to everything, but I do like the balance approach with small communities. Small cities have a lot more flexibility. They have a lot more revenue. They have a lot more experience and technical know-how. But in our smaller communities, we do have to reach a balance.
So when you talk about balance, there's been a few articles about, it's the carrot or the stick approach. It sounds like the carrot approach is the Invest New Hampshire or the C-PACER type of thing or what have you. That's, incenting developers to get into the state. And then on the other hand, you've got HB 459 and SB 84 that, to me, sound very similar, just reading them quickly. My understanding is neither one has passed the still in committee, but just as an example, in Brookfield here, we, in 2024, the voters voted to increase our zoning from 2 acres to 5 acres. Anything that was there as a lot already was grandfathered, but going forward, now we currently have 5 acre zoning. So how do we reconcile the vote that our people had a year and a half ago with things like SB 84?
So in the 80s, late 70s, 80s, zoning came into most of northern New Hampshire. And it was knee-jerk because we were getting this huge influx of second home people and everything else, which we still have. So larger lot size was the key to doing that. I know there's a breakdown that shows how many communities are 5 acres or more, 2 acres or more, and there was an attempt through, and I can't tell you, we have so many bills and numbers, but there was an attempt to say that 50% of your lots have to be brought down to 50% in size or something to that effect. So you, as your governing body, your town would say, this area is just the most important. It has rural qualities, farming, everything else. This has to stay in the large lot, and then a certain percentage, 25, 30%, have to come down to a much smaller. And I already mentioned that unless you get lot sizes to a certain size, the only housing you're going to attract are $1 million homes or more. So the carrot approach is a wonderful way to put it. I think if towns were to dabble as we were talking about in the Shrednosopy, if perhaps a town would dabble in the fact of saying, here's an area that we either have infrastructure, which is water and sewer. It does not have to have water and sewer. It has to have capable soil to do group septic systems. Let's try a section, an overlay district that we would put on top of everything else and say, in this area, we think this is where growth should happen. And, perhaps you get down to 10,000 square foot lots or something. I'm hopeful that if we get towns, small towns, to think in those terms, and in that restrictions, governance, covenants, that the resale has to be has to stay in the same person for X number of years. I think you can get a taste of what's probably right, or otherwise, well, right. That's my opinion, not yours. I should clarify right there. I've always been an advocate, but as Joe said, it's a balancing act, and there has to be a place. I don't want to see 4-story, 5-story apartment buildings stuck in the middle of a rural landscape. I grew up, and many of you grew up my age, where my father was a veteran, Mom, we had the family dream. We had a little quarter-acre lot. We had a small ranch that was 24 by 32 feet long, and we raised 3 children in there and lived our life. That's the expectation we have to go back to.
So there's 234 tribes in New Hampshire. They both act and think differently. So I am a local kind of outlook type of guy. I believe master plans for local communities and their destiny is within their hands and their local leadership. Otherwise, why do we live in New Hampshire? We're unique, we're different in that regard with other states. I did notice there was, I think there was I don't know if it was a law, but there's an assumption that any local ordinance can't be counter to the state building codes. And so that's a sense of uniformity across the state. I think that's probably a good thing. I dealt with a lot of constituents on fire code issues, and I found that the local towns are more restricted than the state. And that's good. Sometimes it brings headache to me, but I'd like to go to the fire marshal, Sean Toomey, and say, Sean, come into the meeting and fix this. I can't counsel it because they're more restrictive. So I respect that. That's where the local control. There is no such thing as local control in New Hampshire, but you tell that to a small group of people who live in a town that wants to kind of live within their master plan or their viewpoint, then I would argue there is local control in New Hampshire. Again, I come in with a small town perspective, and so I respect the 234 Tribes Act and think differently. And so I think, again, it's a balance, you know. If you're a community that has light industry and you're zoned for, you know, certain, you have industrial park that allows you to grow that type of businesses, or if you're in a lakes community, or if you're in a community with a lot of mountains, or if you're a community that has access to the roadways immediately, you know, you have to respond differently to the way your community is physically laid out and what's in your community already. So I think the better decisions are made locally. I hope in the future that the state does not usurp entirely local control or viewpoint, because I think that would be a sad day for New Hampshire. So I know they're aggressive special interests, and there are lobbyists and there are other groups, but they have to understand that they live in the state too. And, you know, we have to understand and respect the viewpoint regionally and locally. So that's just my viewpoint. And I see you have your New Hampshire Municipal Association lead person here, who probably might agree to that viewpoint, that they're going to listen to the municipalities. Because ultimately, you know, it's about quality of living. It's really the bottom line. And respecting the ability that people should be able to build a house on their own land to within reason. So that's all I have to say there.
So what's the chances that will happen?
Chances of what will happen?
That we will lose all and not exist?
Well, not hopefully while we are in office, because the reality is, I grew up in this community, this area. Why would I want to give it away? Have you ever tried to go into Wakefield and try to do something that the town doesn't want to do? Have you ever tried to go into Wakefield and build a Dollar General store? You know? Have you ever, you know, my town, and I'm sure Brookfield, is well established in what they think their community should be all about. And they'll go into the court system to fight it. The legislature, you know, as much as the legislature is trying to educate us, we're trying to educate the legislature. So it's a balance. It is a balance.
We have, just by the way, we have no commercial zone at all. Anywhere. Any other questions from the board? And then we can go to public comments.
Are we talking only about ADUs or such, or?
Maybe based on from their comments. Based on their
Education. We're paying a hefty price because of what's coming out of Concord. And it's hurting, and, you know, what can be done around it? Can it be reduced or equaled out? You know, our cost per student is far higher than Wolfboro. Wolfboro has the school, but, you know, we're knee-deep in costs, comments.
Well, I can speak to that. There's a ruling that just came out here out of the courts, the state Supreme Court, that suggests that we've underfunded, you know, education here in the state of New Hampshire. That is a legislative prerogative. They have to decide if they're going to increase that amount that's per pupil here in the state of New Hampshire or not. Ultimately, it rests with the legislature and the committees that, and the budget committees and finance committees that look at that topic. As far as we could always use more money for education if it's appropriate. We are in troubles in northern New Hampshire right now, where the student population has, gone down twofold. And we have the same buildings, the same level of teachers that they're funding. And so, but if you try to consolidate Berlin High School with Gorham High School, and that would be the most cost-effective thing to do, then suddenly it's a cultural clash that you're up against. It's not the practical thing where we're going to save the tax dollar, taxpayers for the taxpayer. It's about, no, we want our school, you keep your school. So there are solutions out there, but it takes local boards and regionalization to come together to make that happen. So I don't lay everything on the state or the legislature. Sometimes it's local solutions as well.
What about right here in Brookfield? His question, but here for Brookfield.
So what I know, and I can only speak from my experience in Wakefield, but I grew up with an area agreement, okay? So I had an option to go to Spalding. My other option was to go to Spalding. My other option was to go to Spalding. And I used to hitchhike to basketball practice. I was just glad to be a rural kid who had an opportunity. So, but there are ways of looking at like 15% rule or an area agreement or some other option. I mean, other communities around the state are looking at options at all the time. I mean, in Twin Mountain, they wanted to break away from their district because they had some ungodly amount of money. I don't know if it was $17,000 per pupil or whatnot, but it was really high, and they started to look for other options. And I think that's really local school boards, local leaders have to decide, is there another option for Brookfield? For instance, Middleton, for many years, was not happy with the Farmington experience. And they ended up building their own elementary school. And then they said, oh, by the way, there's a high school not too far away from us called Kingswood, and they set up an agreement with Kingswood. So I think you absolutely have to look outside the box and see, for the amount of money you're paying, can we get the best bang for our buck? And also understand that transportation has a lot to do with that as well. So I'm a rural kid, I feel your pain, I really do, I've been there, and I've had kids in the school system, local school system, but sometimes taxpayers have to look outside the box.
I'd like to add that the agreement that came down from the state Supreme Court was saying adequate education somewhere in the neighborhood of $8,000 a student. And I'm willing to guess you're probably in the $20,000 range. I've got towns
36 last I knew.
36, and I have many, many towns like that. So wouldn't it, we said, well, in the Senate, wouldn't it be nice if we just said, okay, we agree with the position of the state Supreme Court, we only give out $8,000 a student. That's not going to fly. I was in a conversation, education's not one of my specialties, but I'll tell you my peripheral conversations. So the area agreements that Joe was speaking of, and the ability to get out of a co-op if you're in a co-op, are locked in typically for some as few as 5 and many of them as 10. So up in Conway, they're coming, a lot of towns in that district up there are into that term right now to redo their contracts. And Town of Freedom is sending a certain amount to Kingswood instead of Kennett. Eaton is going to do the same thing. And they are going to see a cost savings of over $10,000 per student when they switch from one school system to the other. Still not enough. It's way too much money for people to pay. I live in Freedom, and a large class in Freedom Elementary is about 7 kids. Most classes are combined classes. Now, if you got up a pine tree and looked across the Ospey River, you would see Effingham School over there, elementary, big, beautiful school, sitting again there with hardly anybody sitting there. Doesn't make any sense whatsoever that you operate 2 school systems, 2 different SAUs, when, we couldn't even fill one of the 2 buildings. So a lot of that pressure, and you see it at school board meetings, you see it at town meetings. The population's getting restless, and I think I think it's going to be the towns that are going to cause that to happen. And if legislation has to be brought back, legislation's been brought forward to allow people by town vote to break their commitment with, I don't have the right term, their SAUs or such, and it has been turned down overwhelmingly year after year. So maybe the anger, and by the anger, our pocketbooks are getting to the point that the appetite's there, that maybe something like that should happen again. And I'm willing to listen to it if people have that problem.
I just wanted to add, Bridgewater just left Newfoundland school district, and they're joining another school district, and they did it this past legislative session. So they were probably in the same position that you are in now and said, we got to do something different to save our tax dollars and get more bang for the buck. So it's just, creating a commission or a task force to examine it, to see what are the options. Remember, I only had Spalding. There wasn't school choice back in my day, but you have a lot of more choices today that you can look at. Because
That's not true.
Croydon had examples where they had to challenge it, the constitutional aspect of where they could send kids to a Montessori school. So your challenges are there. Are they legally the right pathway? They could be through the challenge, but you're going to have to decide as a community, you're going to build something on your own? Are you going to transport kids somewhere else? Are you going to homeschool them? Are you going to send them to the charter school up in Ossipee? I mean, you're going to have to look for choices and options. Are you going to go to Kingswood and say you need to lower the price here? I don't think that's going to happen. So they have bills to pay as well. So, I mean, I think you need good people, citizens, to sit around a table for several months, get experts in, give you information, advice on where Brookfield's at and what some of the possible solutions are. Otherwise, you'll just stand in place and just say, we're paying too much money. You got to stand up and do something.
So $8,000 in New Hampshire per student is the budget, I guess?
No, that's adequacy. That the state should be paying per student.
And how does that compare to other states? Just as an example. Off the top of your head?
I couldn't tell you that. The state has, in the last two budgets and many budgets before that, found millions of dollars to go to the towns towards education. I think it was, I'm thinking 22 million this last budget round. I think it was more than that last time. But the problem is a lot of towns are saying we need more. We need more facilities. We need more of this. And the towns are making a local decision themselves. I'm not saying Kingswood or Kennett, but the school system's saying we need a brand new huge gymnasium. And next thing you know, all of your towns are in the cooperative. Boom, they're all paying more and more money.
Do you know what Freedom was paying to the town of Conway for their school?
I'm of the understanding the high school was in the $30,000 range, and that they're going to Kingswood and it's going to be a savings of $10,000 per student or something. That's my understanding, what I've been told.
They're paying 20, we're paying 36.
Oh, I could take you all over the place. The
Yeah.
little towns are just,
Yeah.
and I can tell you, my grandchildren and my business partner, if we all stay in Freedom, in 3 years, we're going to double the school population. We're going to have four of my grandchildren sitting in class.
So education is certainly one of the reasons that taxes are high at Brookfield. Along with no commercial district, and we have a lot of open space. So our master plan, which we're in the process of redoing, talks about scenic rural character and maintaining open space, and et cetera, et cetera. I think that's kind of the tipping point, I guess, if you will, as to how do you reconcile that? And maybe we had a warrant article, and it was 109 no, 71 yes about development on roads, and there's a bill about Class 6 road development. How do we deal with that when we've got, 100 to 70 people, 110 to 70 people in the town, saying we don't want that? I guess maybe go back to your balance portion of it, or the overlay district.
I'll speak of the Class 6 roads. So the agreement is at present, unless your town has regulations against, you can build on the Class 6 road, but to build on the Class 6 road, you have to sign agreements that you will take no police, you'll take no fire, and you'll take no ambulance service. And there are, I believe, quite honestly, there are less than 7 in the state that have a restriction against that. So it was not me, but there were people in the legislature that were hearing repeatedly that places like yourself that have large tracts of old roads and so forth, that why not make that available again? So there's a provision that I think is another 10 months or something on that to going into place, but the idea was, why not open that to, and I believe it's really geared to single family. It's not geared to subdivision regulations or anything else, because then you have a hand in it. I don't see it being a big push. I just see it as an alternative.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I can answer your question when you said why not open it up, and the answer is because the people don't want to. This local control and the local vote was to say no building on Class 6 roads. So that's really the answer why, and for the state to override that, I think is a little bit of overreach.
Okay, I appreciate your opinion.
None of us will sleep well if there's a child in one of those homes and they have refused police and fire services. I don't think that that's good for anyone.
Okay.
Rich?
So what's the best way for a town to communicate with you folks as to what we'd like to see pass and not pass? Because there was a strong feeling in some of these recent bills we didn't support. We lobbied with the municipal association to represent us, and it seems like for whatever reason they passed anyway. So how do we do a better job?
Maybe you need a better municipal association.
If you'd like me to address that, Mr.
No,
Chairman.
I'm jesting. I have one relationship.
No, I know.
I'd like to have an answer.
Yeah, it's who your representatives are, and it's the vote in the House and the vote in the Senate. So if you don't like your representation, the easiest thing is to overturn your representation.
We understand that.
Yeah. That is a very small amount of. Let me try to get back to your question. How do you? Well, every bill that's heard has a public hearing, and you used to have to drive yourself to Concord to be heard. That's no longer the process anymore. The process is all the meetings are online, and there is a place to make your choice known, whether you were for or against, and it lands in every representative or every senator's mailbox, and especially in the House, it's all done in committee, so everything goes through committee. When it comes to the Senate, it's more of a communal thing. So I don't know what the right, it's always the mix that, in the House, it's the mix that shows up that day. There can be as many as 40 people don't show up that day to do business. But it's making your opinion known and holding your representatives to that. And I would just like to say, you can't be a one-issue person. Look at the whole. I don't think that's an answer you like, but that's sort of where it is.
Well, just one follow-up. You supported these bills? You voted for them?
I voted for everything that's on this paper right here.
Okay.
So, I just, from my perspective in the executive branch, so I'm not a policymaker, and I don't vote on the state budget. However, I do have, again, a bully pulpit. And so, a lot of communities will enlist my name, my voice. You probably know that I've been very much against carbon offset credits, and I think it's because it ties up the land for decades, and so I've been very vocal on that particular topic. But I was enlisted into that topic by the Connecticut Headwaters issue up in Pittsburgh, and by other folks from Stewartstown and from Clarksville and within Coas County to say, we need your help, Councilor Kenny, because you're one of 5. We only have 9 state reps in Coas County. Your voice is a lot larger than ours. So that I was with them from day one on that topic. So if you need me down in Concord to enlist me for some big topic that I think I can join with you on, I'm always there available. It's a massive territory, so I never know where I'm going to be, but usually the first half of the year, particularly in the budget year, we spend a lot of time in Concord, looking at the budget, looking at policy. The second year we'll be looking predominantly at policy. But yeah, I'm here, I'm a local guy, you can find me, people somehow find me, so I got a call today from a lady over in New Hampton who said, what's that up in the sky that they're spreading up in the sky? I said, what are you talking about? There's something they're spreading up in the sky and I need you to look into it. And I said, well, I do know the Adjutant General, and I do know that he's got the National Guard and the Air National Guard under him, and that they got a point of contact to the FAA. And these are the people that we can contact to figure out if that plane was allowed to be in our airspace, dropping whatever they were doing. And of course, it could have been just normal fuselage kind of stuff that goes on. But people call me for the strangest things, but I do follow up, and I do try to give them an answer or a place to go to get an answer. But on a regular basis, I would encourage you to do legislative roundtables, invite me into them. At the beginning of a session, typically the hospitals, a lot of different larger groups will have legislative forums where legislators will come in and speak to the topics of the day. And if you think Southern Carroll County needs to get together about these topics, just enlist us. I'm sure we'll all show up and participate in that discussion.
Other public comments, questions?
Steve Patrick, 1411 Wentworth Road. Doesn't the Class 6 road bill that just got passed eliminate the liability of a town should the fire, rescue, police not be able to get there? That's how I understood the reading of the legislation. This relieves the town from a liability being sued if they can't get there. It doesn't say they're not going to get there or go there.
Thank you for that. Yep, I believe you're correct.
Yeah, just to add to that, there is another law that says public safety, if there are houses on a road, there has to be access to the houses in order for an ambulance or a fire truck to get there. And so there have been a lot of legal discussions about that over the years. Why isn't the town or the state maintaining a road that I live on? And they should, because there has to be an access way for first responders to get to. So that's another law on the board. Folks, I hope it's not counter.
It's the emergency access, RSA, that says we have to provide access.
Exactly.
Where it is.
Exactly.
It's an RSA.
Yeah.
So just on that point, and then I'll get to you, Ed. So if we have a remote ADU on a 5-acre parcel that's in the backside, can we require them to have a driveway for access? What do you think?
Well, I'm thinking if they have access through the main structure, okay, there should be some way to get to that accessory dwelling unit, whether going around.
I would think, right?
I would
As a
believe you
planning
can.
board. To follow that law that you just mentioned.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, just the fact that the RSA absolves the town of liability does not mean that the town can't be sued.
Oh, of course not, you can sue anybody for anything.
The town has to go through the expense of defending itself anyway. So it's going to be a potential to be a large impact on such a small town as us. The other issue that I'm concerned with is we have some class 6 roads that are access points to houses of other towns that allow building on class 6 roads. That has nothing to do with our class 6 road. That's their class 6. Even it's the same road, but it crosses that town line. So are we then going to be liable? Because they didn't sign a waiver that says Brookfield's not.
You're talking about North Wolfboro Road, I believe. And those people all...
It's way up at the north.
Janice
Road.
Yeah, North Wolfboro, they all signed waivers to put their houses there.
Right, with Wakefield. I mean, with Wolfboro.
Yeah, and they're serviced by somebody in Wakefield to plow that road and everything, from what I understand.
If that falls through, we're
Well, the town has a contract with that person.
I don't want to belittle the conversation. There are towns all over this state that have permitted building homes on Class 6 road. And I have not had a lot of that discussion ever brought back to us when I was a rep or I was now in the Senate, talking about how problematic this is in other towns. I know a couple towns in the local area that are really concerned about it, but over the historical perspective of this being out in other towns, it has not been raised to my attention.
My name's Brody DeShays. I'm with the New Hampshire Municipal Association. I can say, Senator McConkey wasn't on the Senate Commerce Committee that received our extensive testimony on many of these bills, but an example, the specific bill that we're talking about, I believe is Senate Bill 281, and we've provided legal guidance to your board and all the governing bodies throughout the state. And so previously, the process for approving a Class 6 road, whether it was a subdivision off of the Class 6 road, if it met the frontage and the different subdivision requirements, the acreage requirements, or just a single family home, it was the governing body approved on a case-by-case basis. So in order for the building permit to be issued, the owner of the parcel would go to the governing body, so your board of selectmen, and say, we would like to build on this Class 6 road. And your selectmen would kind of look at this proposal and say, how much maintenance needs to be done to the road? Do we need to make requirements for you to update a bridge in case our own, safety apparatuses can be brought across it? In your town, for example, you don't have your own fire or police. You need to contact the town of Wakefield to check those things. Under the current law now, it's essentially, if someone comes and goes to pull a building permit, the onus is on the municipality to say, can the building be insured? Unsure, you can determine if a building can be insured that hasn't been built yet. We'll take that aside, because that's a very difficult thing to determine. Are you willing to sign a liability waiver to say that we won't take any public safety services and we don't want this road built to town standards? And the third thing is registering it with the Registry of Deeds so it stays with your plat and your deed for the rest of the building's life. Now, there are twofold things that municipalities can do to deal with this, and we did raise this to the Senate committee. One is if your municipality doesn't want building on Class 6 roads, rather than allowing a case-by-case basis, what's reasonable and makes sense and what doesn't, you can just eliminate it as part of your frontage requirements. Now no one will be building on Class 6 roads, which further exacerbates housing issues in your municipality. The second option is you have to let it happen. You got to really stay on top of those people to keep it with their deed, and then you still have that duty to try to provide those safety services. And it ultimately will come on to the municipality likely to make sure those roads are safe and passable for fire apparatuses and police cars, which, kind of defeats the whole purpose of the Class 6 road. The town has vacated responsibility for it. So, I think these are the things where local municipalities had this ability to make these case-by-case decisions, listen to your local voters, determine where is reasonable development, what has the infrastructure to sustain that, and what hasn't. And what we've seen in Concord is, especially this year, we've seen the biggest overhaul of the State Zoning Enabling Act that was originally established in 1925. And we've seen, a lot of folks who are housing advocates that believe if you build it, they will come. They haven't seen the value in local decision making that's currently happening in this room today. And I think that's an important thing we have to remember. I think Class 6 roads for your town is a prime example of, there was a process, it was working, you guys were, your planning board was determining where can we bring roads up to Class 5, where do we keep them Class 6, and then let's let our governing body make that determination of where does it make sense to develop on Class 6 roads. Every town just lost its right to be able to go through that local decision-making process and determination of development. And so I'll say from the Municipal Association standpoint, we're opposed to all zoning mandates, and we're going to continue working to not just repeal some of these, but restore some local control back over land use. I mean, we're very concerned with some of these bills, and your board is not the only board that we have a staff member meeting tonight. We have at least 2 other staff members who are going out, and we're regularly meeting with people throughout the next few weeks, because there are a lot of towns who are really worried about this stuff, and we kind of anticipated it would happen. So we have legal counsel. I'm being pressed into conscription to come to some of these meetings. Our executive director went to the Seacoast to go visit a town today, and it's very rare that she does that kind of stuff to talk about what are the implications of this, or to just listen to the public testimony of these things and people's concerns, and listen to the public policymakers and what concerns they may have or what rationale they may have, so that we can continue those discussions going to the next legislative session. So this is great that you guys are doing this, and it's great that both of you are here to be able to hear from the town of Brookfield. And I imagine you might get contacted by others. We've been surprised. I don't think NHMA has ever seen Brookfield host legislators, or us. It's kind of unprecedented. So
I think what Brody's alluding to is that whatever can be done can be undone. And I think back of Abraham Lincoln, our freedoms and liberties are at risk while the legislature's in session. And having been a former legislator, I can totally understand that, because we do make mistakes as legislators, and we can undo those mistakes down the road. So, that's why your voice is important during the process, after the process, and into the new year, to hear from you and what is appropriately passed that makes sense, and what probably doesn't fit and that needs to be repealed.
Brody, does NHMA know of any instances of a town being sued because services couldn't get down a Class 6 road in case of an emergency or whatever?
I can't cite any specific examples, but I am aware that that is a huge issue municipalities deal with, or to try to head it off, they know they need to update, the bridge, or require the property owners to pay, some offsite exaction. So, basically, hey, you guys are the property owners that benefit from this piece of infrastructure. You need to upkeep it yourself and have an agreement from the town. Again, as mentioned from the RSAs, it's a duty for the municipality, even if someone signs that waiver, they still got to go and traverse through that Class 6 road. Who knows, after the spring washout or during the mud, right? You don't know what the quality of that road's going to be, and especially for you guys in Brookfield, who from the Wakefield public, from there, whoever the ambulance provider is, the fire department or the police department, who's going to go inspect every Class 6 road and then contact your building code enforcement people to make sure that the property owners and all the abutters keep the road up to snuff.
Right.
Otherwise, you're just risking, and a big issue might be if someone puts a subdivision on a Class 6 road. You guys have a lot of land. Let's say you still have your 2-acre minimums. Someone puts a 10-house subdivision out there and one catches on fire. You can't get your fire apparatus out there. What's going to happen? You're not going to just have a one building fire that you can put out and a few rooms burn. You might have multiple buildings. And these are things that we've raised to the legislature, and we've seen others on the opposite side of the issue. And I'll have an article that'll be going in Town and City. I assume you guys all subscribe, being municipal members. Talking about not just all of these and our legal advice and where to find additional advice, but on top of that, those that we kind of were opposed with, who were very moneyed interests, like the New Hampshire Business Industrial Association, our statewide Chamber of Commerce, or the New Hampshire Home Builders Association, or Housing Action New Hampshire, who are of the belief that zoning in local municipalities are the problem, that we in this room are the problem, that we're the problem for housing. Despite, I watched your last 2 meetings, what I heard was more consideration for development and how it impacts your municipality than anybody in Concord has provided that I've seen the last 6 months. A group of caring members who are locally elected, who volunteer your free time and do things like this that you're not required to do, but do it anyways. And, I'll give you an example. You guys talked about House Bill 631, the mixed use mandate. If you have any commercial building can be converted into multi-unit apartments, a multi-dwelling apartment building. And when I hear a municipality that's saying, well, we need commercial, but, and you're starting to have those discussions in June and July, and then all of a sudden midway through July, snap, you cannot have a strictly commercial district anymore. It now has to be mixed use. And you guys are going through this master planning process. The state has no master plan. The town of Brookfield has a master plan, though, that your residents have actually worked on. So, this is why we provide such, strong advocacy on behalf of you guys in Concord to really point out that, and these are the stories that we tell, you have constituents who are not the problem. They're the solution. They're the front lines. They're working on development. They're elected by their voters. They, are abiding by their warrant articles. They're doing it the New Hampshire way, right? And so we really, we hope more conversations arise from this, especially after this session, because this was the largest grab of local control of any issue this year on zoning ordinances that we've ever seen in New Hampshire. So, it's something that we have a lot of upset members, and, I feel terrible when I have to attend meetings like this and hear, sometimes it almost feels like a personal failure, but it was just the headwinds were what they were this year, and they're changing, and we're hoping that as they change, we can restore that authority that you guys rightfully deserve. And you guys are that local government that's the most responsive to the people. It should be rightfully. I think, the decisions made in this room, not necessarily in Concord, just with all due respect to any policymaker and, what needs they're trying to balance. That's just our very strong position, as, I've highlighted in our policies and legislative position book that I've provided to your board, so you can understand, how we make these policies and also what we're defending for you guys in Concord and advocating for.
So that was driven all by housing? What did you say?
The legislature has made committees designated for passing legislation and subcommittees. The Senate's a subcommittee of the Commerce Committee. Right. The House is a designated policy committee of a desire to create more housing. That is their goal, and
that's their mission.
And stated as from some of those legislative leaders in public hearings is that municipalities and their zoning regs and the decisions made by the voters at town meeting, that's the problem, that's what's prohibiting housing, despite, our position is that no municipality is the same, as Councillor Kenny said, 234 tribes, 234 ways of being able to address local needs, and, our belief is that, these people aren't the problem, you people aren't the problem, it's complicated. Councillor Kenny mentioned Invest New Hampshire. There's a lack of funding that we've seen from the federal and state government over years. We know budgets are tight, but the reality is you invest in the things you want. We've seen HOP grants, the Housing Opportunities Program, that municipalities, they would get funding and grants to work with master planning to regulate, to change their zoning regs to incentivize housing, but in a way that worked for them. We saw a lot of those grants get taken away. You guys mentioned your Regional Planning Commission, who you should definitely leverage as a member of Stratford Regional Planning Commission. They lost their funding from the state in this last budget round. We get the budget's tight, but those are the things that help you guys have the tools to develop your municipality in a way where your voters don't get absolutely upset and I guess livid at you guys, but also balance that need of development, preservation, resource, management, and housing. It's all interconnected in your master plan. And again, you guys master plan, Concord doesn't, right? There's no central planning in New Hampshire. It's municipal planning with citizens and their locally elected boards.
So that said, one thing I came across was RSA 9A and B.
RSA 9A.
And just reading, I just wrote down a couple of things that it talks about smart growth and, quote, retaining as much open space as possible, unquote. That sounds really consistent with Brookfield's master plan to me. So when you see, that was written a long time ago because it's RSA 9. And now there are 20 or 30 housing-related bills that are going sort of against that. And to me, it's like, how do you wrestle with that as a legislator?
It's really balanced, because 50 years ago we celebrated the current use law to really encourage open space that was led by then Mel Thompson, the governor of New Hampshire, who felt large parcels of land were going to be subdeveloped and that we were going to lose our cultural heritage, our agricultural heritage, everything that made New Hampshire unique. And as he would always say, when people came into the state, what's New Hampshire all about? He'd say, well, New Hampshire's what America used to be. And hence that current use policy was, overwhelmingly supported. That's used today to help communities maintain open space. And obviously a tax reduction for the people on the property. From that came many years ago, I think it was the view tax discussion that we had, that a lot of these current use sites have, they're beautiful. They look over, ungodly scenic views and, pastures and whatnot. And so there was a big push to push the view tax, which, I think that ultimately got buried. But so I think it all comes down to balance, to whether it's housing or if it's open space or if it's infrastructure that a community needs, whatever it is, for its town hall, its fire department. And I understand that Brookfield is a very unique community. It is a small rural community that's sandwiched in between Wakefield and Brookfield, Wakefield and Wolfboro. And so with that, it's very unique. Out of the 234, it has its own identity, its own, kind of geographical layout. And you've had to reach out. You have an area, your intertown agreement with Wakefield. And as a selectman, I remember going through that process many years ago. It was always interesting to see 3 Brookfield selectmen come to a Board of Selectmen's meeting in Wakefield saying the contract is too expensive, it's too much, can you cut it? And of course, we always had the upper hand. He said, well, no, I think that's a fair deal, sign the contract, So there was a lot of that went on, and probably still goes on for all I know. I haven't been a selectman for a while. But you are unique, and you need to be protective of this area. Because when I ever mention Brookfield around the state, and if they know it, they'll say that's a beautiful community, that's one we like to pass through. And that's the challenge, is maintaining that quality of living and maintaining, the tax base so you don't get overrun and then you find yourself doing stuff that you never wanted to do because of the way that Brookfield has always been laid out. So I will say I got my ball joint of my tire fixed the other day. So we mentioned a lot about Class 6 roads. I said, what's this from? To the mechanic. He goes, you drive on a lot of dirt roads? I go, yeah, all the time. He goes, that's why you're replacing your ball joint. So I'm going to blame it on Class 6 roads that I travel all the time in my district. So there's one between Middleton and New Durham I travel all the time that has a muddy, I think it's a Muddy Road Brewery on it, so I'll blame it on that road.
That's a Class 5 road.
That is a Class 6.
Oh, it's not Class 6?
That's right. That
Oh
is
my
a
God,
Class 5. But the beer's still good.
They've upgraded that road, okay.
Well, think, Counselor, if that's a Class 5 road, what's a Class 6 road look like?
Well, I've got one, it's called Dolly Cop up there in Gorham. But yeah, I mean, the point is that we live in New Hampshire, we deal with the elements, and we want to keep our quality of living. So keep fighting for Brookfield.
Guys?
Yeah, you keep mentioning balance. Who determines what the balance is? How does that get adjudicated? Let's say if the state doesn't have a master plan and we have a master plan, who's to determine what the balance is? It doesn't, we're never going to really know what, it's not going to really be transparent, and we're not going to know how to deal with issues.
Well, you'll know balance when it comes up and touches you, if it's out of balance, I should say. I mean, you have the legislative process, you have the court system, you have your local people who can go to Concord and raise their concerns. So balance to me is what you want your quality of life to be here in Brookfield. If that takes you to Concord, or that takes you to other means, those are the things that you have to strive for. Now that, I mean, that's the way I view balance. I mean, if someone's coming into my town of Wakefield and they want to do something on the top of North Wakefield Hill over Pine River Pond, you probably have heard about it right now.
Yeah.
And there's a long-range shooting range. There's a lot of homes on the lake, and there's a lot of kids, and there's a lot of investment property there. Now that's still an active process, but most people would say that's not the balance of quality of living in Wakefield. So there are ways to prevent that. There's some who might encourage it. I would say I don't think most people do in Wakefield. So that's reaching a balance to me. It's fighting for what you believe is a balance.
Lady over here.
Ed, you mentioned things about the master plan. I'd like to find out where agricultural falls into this, because this was a very thriving agricultural community, and I'm trying to build that back. Nadia Carpenter, Lyford Road and Stoneham Road. I represent Carroll County Farm Bureau, and I represent a large group of people from Concord, and I'm not the only farmer in this room, and we're concerned about our own private land access, our own land being encroached upon by developments or developers or whatever, and we'd like to know that we are protected in this agricultural community and not being kind of swept under the rug or pushed aside, because there are a lot of new farmers around here, and agricultural stuff is thriving and making a comeback in this community, and we'd like to see it continue.
Yeah, I don't.
It's a big concern.
So we have basically two zoning districts, besides rec. RA is the other one, so agricultural can fly in any part of that except for the rec district right now. So I wouldn't say it's being discouraged by any means. As we have discussed here a little bit, there are some parts of the town saying it's too expensive to be here, we need more people here, we need commercial to get the tax base higher. So that's one element that's probably fighting the broadening of agricultural aspects of the town. But again, I'd go back to what the councilor said, that personally I would think it should be a balance between the two. And the reason a lot of us moved to Brookfield is because of the open space and the agricultural, rural, scenic character of the town.
Talking about balance, it's really what the local population, voting population determines the balance should be. And if we have an ordinance that is counter to what this state law is, let's use the auxiliary dwelling unit as an example. So we have to modify that legislation, our ordinances, and it's got to go in the form of a warrant article to the town. Now, what do we do if, one, the planning board decides to not recommend it, even though it's a warrant, and then what again happens if the town says, nah, we're not going to do that? Where's the balance? How does that get resolved?
Well, I would just say it needs to be resolved legislatively. I mean, obviously, if you're saying to the state of New Hampshire that we're not going to abide by the state laws, I think there's a legal problem there. Secondly, I would say that it is state government that gives towns the authorities that it needs to run their towns. So with that, it's kind of a two-way street, if you will. There's a street to Concord and there's a street to Brookfield. And somewhere in between there, you got to meet and kind of talk it out. But I hear what you're saying, that townspeople, we pass non-binding resolutions through warrants all the time that are non-binding. But if you pass something that opposes, unless it's non-binding, it's an expression of the votes, but if you literally pass an ordinance that goes against state law, then you set the community up for a lawsuit.
I'm talking about the other end of that scenario. In other words, we put forward a warrant that complies with the state law, but the voters say no.
Well, then the voters are setting the community up for a lawsuit. So in other words, you need to, as leaders, to express that this is state law, and this is why this particular warrant article is on here. to go along with the state law and the provisions. But I don't think most municipalities, I know in my household, I don't want to fight City Hall. I don't want to have to go to court. And, you know, I have raised teenagers, and there were times where I felt like, no, just pay the fine and, you know, teach the life lessons and move on. But I don't think any community wants to take legal action unless they're just pushed back into a corner so far where it just doesn't make any sense, and they have to take legal action.
I want to, Ed Comeau, 212 Stone Road. I want to focus my comments on the detached accessory dwelling unit prohibition in Brookfield. I don't really believe that the legislature should get involved locally unless it's violating, or a rule that was voted on by a town of 40 people in a town meeting violates someone's private property rights.
Right.
So if I want to put a detached accessory dwelling unit on my property, Brookfield, 40 people showing up at the townhouse, said, no, you're not allowed to. That is when I think the state should step in. Just as they step in with the Second Amendment and not allowing towns to make rules governing firearms. It's the same thing. For me personally, when it comes to the Constitution, that is where the legislature should step in. All the other micromanaging I could kind of do without it, but the detached accessory dwelling unit and towns denying people making huge frontages so you can't divide your land, I mean, that kind of stuff. That's, again, property rights. So my opinion is, I'm very thankful that you voted for it, but I would have more focused on just the constitutional part of it, which is the private property rights. That's my comment on that.
If I could just follow quickly. So when the ADU law was first passed in the legislature a number of years ago, it was to grant towns the ability to have attached or detached. And it set a minimum threshold of 700 and something square feet per unit. And it was intended to be a framework. And then towns then came along and said, okay, we'll accept only attached. And attached have to have other doors. And they said, no, that's the maximum size, it's going to be that. There was a move this year, and Brody can correct me, but there was a move to say detached or attached are done by right. And there were some other caveats with that, and it didn't pass through. You know, we talked about 25 enabling laws. Not all 25 made it through, and that was one of them. I think it came down to 7 or 8. I agree with your opinion, but it's each town to decide what it is they want to do. That legislature was brought forward to give that right to you as an individual, but it didn't pass. That's my understanding.
If I may, Mr. Chairman. So to Selectman Gauthier's point, whether you have an ordinance on the books and the state law is passed and your current ordinance that your voters have adopted conflicts with the state law overrides. So that means, you know, there will be ordinances that your town has passed where the state law will override that. Your building inspector, you know, your code enforcement officer can't, you know, deny the building permit. If they meet those conditions of the state law, you have to issue the building permit, unless there's other ordinances that don't conflict with the state law that will prevent the building permit issuance, if that makes sense. So, you know, you guys could try to adopt, and we've seen municipalities where there's a petition warrant article and folks adopt a warrant article or an ordinance that conflicts with state law, the state law overrides it. To your point, Senator McConkey, to my understanding, House Bill 577, the legal guidance that we provided, is that by right, so no conditional use permit or special exception could be required. By right, any individual landowner can put an attached or detached, they'd have to choose one or the other, attached or detached, by right, as long as it meets, as long as the wastewater disposal system, so septic in your municipality, but some might be sewer, meets DES standards. That's kind of the, if I were to put it in 15 seconds of an explanation. Now, that doesn't include the other about 7 to 8 other types of ordinances related to ADUs that either have been watered down or prohibited, but that is essentially, you know, so if you're a property owner and you have a primary dwelling unit that's on on a lot of land that meets a current zoning ordinance of minimum building lot size, then you can build an ADU attached or detached by right. You might need to update your septic system or your wastewater disposal system, but that is now what the law is. It's no longer a determination of the municipality to determine whether or not detached or attached are allowed, or whether or not it's attached, or whether, what types of, there's aesthetic requirements that are required to make it look like it's part of the principal dwelling unit. It's, there's a lot of things under the new ADU law versus the previous one that have really changed a lot. Just by the municipal association, we had to create a whole separate legal guidance just dedicated to basically, and you'll see, I have some extra copies if anyone wants any, but you'll see it says what are the definitions updated, what does the law basically do, what can you do, what can't you do, and then we also have a section, what must you do, because there are certain things that the state now requires you to do as part of the ADU statute. So it's a lot broader than what it was, and the law since 2017, as Senator McConkey has mentioned, is really, it started as enabling, this is an ADU, it needs to be at least 750 square feet, and this is what an attached and detached ADU is, and now it's gotten to the point, we've seen where it is today. It is a mandate on how your zoning ordinances must be read or interpreted, or what is overriding zoning ordinances to permit landowners to have an attached or detached, their choice.
Thank you for the correction.
Can I have a follow-up?
Sure.
The important point of that is it has to be a reasonable regulation. I'm hearing in this town that, now that we can't stop them from putting detached units in, and now we can require a full-fledged road all the way to the house, making it unreasonable. So I'm just saying, this is where we always go. The small towns are now trying to push more regulation. Not to regulate does not mean to stop or restrict. It means to make it flow easily. So it shouldn't be you shouldn't have to jump through all these hoops just to put in. So I'm just warning everybody that's what happened. My final comment is that I have to zoom back to education. When I was in the legislature, I tried to address the apportionment formula, which is getting our tax, killing us in taxes here. No offense. You weren't the lobbyists that showed up. But it was the New Hampshire Municipal Association and other associations that show up committee and crushed it. Crushed every aspect of questioning how much, with that apportionment formula, we're going to pay. And when we try to make laws to get out of the district, to sever the contract, who shows up? The New Hampshire Municipal Association shows up and tries to stop you. So here you do vote for your representatives, but then you have lobbyists come in and try to disrupt what possibly you voted for. So I just want people to know that the Municipal Association is not always there to help what you want as people. They're also representing large nonprofits and other people's concerns, not the people of the town. So it's not always that way.
If I may, Mr. Chairman.
Not you personally.
No, I understand. I do want to state unequivocally, never has NHMA had a policy on cooperative school districts, district area agreements, or apportionment formulas. We've always steered very clear from any school funding issues. It's in our policy handbook there, but we don't the school funding issue is the School Boards Association. Separate association, separate nonprofit, completely. So we do not get involved in school funding issues. We represent the municipalities. While municipalities have the same taxpayers as school districts, we're strictly looking at state policies that impact municipal administration, municipal taxation, assessed values, things of that nature. So I just really want to make that clear. And also, we don't represent any other interest other than our 234 voluntary members, which are the municipalities of the state of New Hampshire. So I just want to, I hear your point that there are folks who lobby on behalf of organizations like Municipal Association, the School Boards Association, that represent those governments' interest, and that's a fact. But our organization does not weigh in on school funding, and that has never been a policy position that we've had, and it's in the booklet that I provided to the board of the town here. And there's even an explanation for how policies are adopted. It needs to be a supermajority of the members, so a supermajority of the 234 municipalities that are voluntarily members of our association who tell me, I am one of our on-site lobbyists, who are in Concord trying to educate folks, this is what you are allowed to lobby for on behalf of our municipalities, and anything that's not included, I would lose my job if I did advocacy on that. That's a big no-no. It would be a violation of my ethical obligations to our members of municipalities of the state. So I hear your point, but I just want to be clear on the record. So that folks, especially our members here, we're not doing any advocacy on school funding issues.
And if I'm wrong, I'll stand corrected, but I'll get back to you with the information of who showed up in the meeting.
If I what?
I will get back to you with the person who showed up in the meeting, who was the New Hampshire Municipal Association. But that's
It wasn't a bill on school funding, it was a bill on governance. How does the organization, the school district function? And the point is that Brookfield and the surrounding towns are such small towns, that if everyone in the town voted for something, Wolfboro can easily override us. So that was the issue. It was not funding, it was how we're going to be organized.
So we could be here for a while talking about education, benefits on the planning board issues, and our guests are here to talk about housing and zoning. Does anybody else have any other comments, questions on housing, zoning, open space, those types of issues?
I have recently learned that there is no longer an agricultural commission in Brookfield, and there are folks that are interested in starting it again. And so I was wondering, what is the planning board's thoughts or opinions on that, if they have any?
I would say it's a selectman issue.
Come to a selectmen's meeting.
Okay.
Any other questions for our guests? They've been here for a while with a blazer on as well. So.
How you survived with that cold?
I learned my lesson in Raymond when I came in my suit.
Well, it's a lot easier surviving in warm weather as a Marine than in cold weather.
That is true.
Any other questions for our guests? Thank you guys very much.
I'd like to thank you, and available to come by anytime if you have questions, any emails. We won't always agree, but I'm willing to have the conversation. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Everybody's free to go. Now that our guests are gone. Non-important business to wrap up. Probably just end up pushing everything into the next meeting.
Oh, nice to meet you.
Give it 1 minute for people.
When you said your name.
Oh, that's great.
Take care. Jan's great. Jan's great. And the small community, everyone's got a
I went down there in person.
Yes, you know what I should have grabbed you as well. Finally coming out of it. I know, right? I'll be right back. And they want to go to the lake, so I go. If you do want to, where we've done advocacy, my colleague signed it. Maybe there was policy. Yes, but
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, you guys can, I brought them for anybody who wanted to read them. I know Jim is the one. Do you guys want to visit? You guys
Just keep an eye on
You guys can harass them. You know, we have all the advice on this. You can just give us a call or demand one of us show them. You know, so.
Thank you.
No, trying to wait until he talks to his constituents a little more.
Well, that's in the end. I'm not bringing the rest of these other stuff cards. You're going to see what the town hall. Yeah, well, we can also have lawyers though that do on-cams. You guys can request a lawyer come and give you guys a training on land use policies.
Oh my God, yes, thank you so much.
Yeah, so if you guys want to do that, reach out.
I'm reaching out right now. Quiet on the set.
Thank you, we're going to resume. It's going to be quick, I promise. So we're going to push anything on rules of procedure. Should be ready in September. September 8th is the next meeting. Master plan update, we should have the draft review and we'll do some edits and hopefully have a public meeting in October. Warrant articles, we've got a couple things on the agenda. It's all old business. Any other member comments from the board? All right. Next meeting, September 8th. Meeting adjourned 7:35 p.m.
Good.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for coming. Happy to. I love our members. And it was on the way home anyways, right? So it was either this or Newington, and my boss was like, do you want to go to Brookfield? I was like, yeah, I do. It's 2 weeks in a row that we had our school board meeting here last week.
Where's home?
Wolfboro.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, what, they want more money?
Brutal.
We're Wolfboro? Elm Street. Elm Street.
Yeah, the select board.
So you guys aren't going to do the old business on the agenda?
So can we have a warrant article?
Yes, you
We
can.
did.
Oh, you did? Okay.
We did cover it, yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, thank you.
A lot of it's just been pushed to next time because we didn't
Oh, because of.
know if they were
yes,
coming for sure, so we put it on the agenda in case they
Gotcha.
had to push it.
Now, we have to go to the selectmen meeting.
Selectmen meeting.
When is that next?
August
I
19th
can't hear you.
at 6 o'clock.
August what?
19th at 6 o'clock.
Every other Tuesday.
You don't want to carry those home.
Well, I mean, I will take back to the office, but if you guys are getting questions from people in town, it might help your building code enforcement. The planning board.